you don't always have to train at peak power output. Every time you're in the weight room, you don't always have to generate the greatest amount of power you're capable of generating. If you can train at generating the greatest amount of power that load allows you to generate, your adaptation will be better, will be greater. Velocity-based training is literally the glue between strength and power. Velocity-based training at its finest is a way to do less, but do it better. Every session is a game on its own.
Hey, what's up guys? Thank you for joining me and welcome to the show. It is a true blessing to be able to connect with the top minds in strength each and every week and share stories, insights, and experiences on becoming stronger in every area of our lives. And now I want to do more for you. I want to invite you to join the exclusive private Facebook group of The Strength Connection. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength in their lives, and it's the perfect space to explore ideas and share your journey. You'll also get exclusive access to the Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. Just go to the Facebook groups, type in the Strength Connection, and you'll be accepted immediately. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the inside. And we're back. Welcome back, Antonio. It's so good to see you, man. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it.
Good to see you too. A long time no see you.
Well, you're busy. I mean, we're busy guys. So, and I know you've been doing a lot of different interesting stuff. We were just chatting offline for a bit about the work you're doing with Dr. Carmelo Bosko's book, some work you're doing with StrongFirst. But first off, you are a kettlebell addict now. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I had a great time. Christine and I went down to San Diego to do our level 1 course. Mm-hmm. With Annalisa and a bunch of other great, amazing instructors. Mm-hmm. It was a great experience. I knew of the quality that comes with StrongFirst because I've attended other events in the past, like mm-hmm. shorter events, but I've never seen so many people all working together or learn, not just the instructors, even the people that were attending the course. Mm-hmm. There was just so much energy and people willing to share, support each other. It was a great experience. And we talked about that last time we caught up. I love kettlebell. I've always loved them. I learned a little bit about that with RKC back in 2009, but I never got the proper training to use them the way they should be used, and especially the art style approach to kettlebell training. Mm-hmm. And now that I've learned it and I'm practicing it, I'm absolutely in love with it.
That's so great, man. Is there anything kind of specific that you felt was so different? Because like you said, I was similar. I found the RKC in 2010 and then I've worked in an SFG1. I've assisted a couple and I wanted to see the evolution of what I knew before versus what they're doing now. And it seems like just the evolution and the reverse engineering of the details. Yep. Now, when you go into that, seems like really it's the major difference, the game changer of what it used to be, which was more like, hard-nosed work. It was a lot of swings. You were putting in the effort, which you're still doing now, but now it seems like the teaching has really evolved to a next level. Did you kind of find something similar?
Absolutely. I might be biased. And again, I'm not an expert about kettlebell training, so don't quote me on everything, but I think the way StrongFirst has designed their method in teaching movements is extremely efficient. Mm-hmm. When you go about teaching a motor skill, whatever that skill is, can be a squat, can be a swing, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of the way you go about teaching the skill can be mostly based on your own experience as a coach, mm-hmm. the way you develop your way of coaching a movement, correcting a movement or whatnot. But there are some principles in motor learning and teaching motor skills that are universals, like the way you go mm-hmm. about breaking down practice, combining exercises and whatnot, and knowing a little bit of the science behind it, motor learning and motor control. I was amazed by seeing the way they go about connecting exercises or breaking down skills into parts and then bringing them back together to teach you the full lift.
Yes.
And they were very careful in the way they were measuring the number of reps you were doing, the mm-hmm. volume you were doing, alternating exercise. the entire weekend, like long weekend, because it was a Friday to Sunday, the entire weekend nothing was done randomly. Everything had a meaning, at a place, and it was connected. And that I think goes above and beyond the quality of the instructors. It's just the quality of the system itself. I was knowing the science behind it, the way you go about teaching movements, that was just impressive. Like I was like, wow, this is the best learning experience I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. It's always funny. I think there's like a joke that goes around in the community with certifications is the no cert is ever the same there. Like the syllabus always changes. And they do that for a reason, because the instructors, they're so good at seeing the volume and the load of what everybody's going, and they make those adjustments so you're not overtraining within a cert, because there's a lot of work to do. And it's so fascinating because I work generally with general population based work. So I was always looking through the lens of how easy you can teach somebody who maybe has never exercised or lifted before how to properly do these advanced movements, all the way to people like you who are doing research with high level athletes and going into the deep science of it. It's really, there's something for everybody that you can see, but it's so easily digestible of the learn by doing and getting it. It's fascinating.
It was great. Oh, like Christine and I were like, I mean, she's a top level athlete. I try to stay fit, let's call it that way. And we were like, oh my gosh, like we're not that great with kettlebells. We have to do 3 days of like training and swinging and pressing. And we're going to be tired. We're going to be demolished. We were tired, but never tired enough not to be able to follow what they were teaching us or be able to do it with a decent amount of like control and proficiency to learn the movement. So it was just perfect. Like I don't have any other way of explaining, like the method, the way the exercise were linked, the number of repetitions, and the overall pattern to teach movements. It was just out of a textbook. It was taught, it was well executed. It was a great experience.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm so glad it was such a good experience. It's interesting because as we're talking, I just came back from Chicago. I was at the SFL cert and been doing this style and in this community for a long time, but SFL, like the same structure of it, like it was so digestible, a lot of work, but you always felt like it was just enough volume where you could still keep everything, technically proficient and down. So throughout all different modalities, it's pretty awesome. So I'm so glad that you got an experience right off the bat of going in. But I do want to get into a lot of the work that you're doing. So I've got my caffeine going here because I always have to make sure I keep up with you going on when we do these, Antonio, because you're so deep into the science behind it. But you've just translated a major work in this strength and conditioning field with Dr. Carmelo Bosko's book, The Strength Training for Muscle Physiology to Program Design, really the science of strength training for sport, which you mentioned to me, like, Dr. Bosco has been one of those guys that has really been such a pioneer, done a lot of different work, but this book seems like it brings it all together. Is that right?
It does. So Carmelo Bosko unfortunately passed away in 2002. His career went roughly from the early 70s to the early 2000s. So 30 some years. Suffice to say that the guy had 2 PhDs. One in exercise physiology and one in sports biomechanics. Back then, exercise physiology wasn't a thing. It was like biology of sport, but was the equivalent of physiology. He's Italian. He was born in Sicily, but he studied in Finland, in France. He worked at Jyväskylä, where the same university in Finland where Akinen is working now, Komi, where Verkhoshansky did some of his studies. So it was just one amazing generations of researchers and the pioneers in many sense and in many fields. And like you and I were talking about that briefly, Dr. Bosko published over a couple of hundred papers and 7 books. All those books were translated in, I think, at least 8 to 10 different languages. The reason why they were never translated in English is funny, is because when I was growing up, so all the way up until the early 2000s, the official language in Europe was French. It wasn't English. So everything was in French-based, at least. More recently, now English is becoming the predominant language in Europe too. So the majority of his books were translated in French, Spanish, Portuguese, and other languages, Russian too. He has done a lot of research, anywhere from like biochemistry of sport, if you will, like how to do blood work on athletes to figure it out, like overtraining, overreaching, all those variables. He has done a lot of research with vibration devices. He has done a lot of research in testing. As a matter of fact, he's known for the Bosko Test, which is known as a test, but it's not a test. It's not a single test. It's a protocol of different tests that are designed to create a profile of an athlete in terms of force. The famous force velocity profile is just a bigger version of it. But he also has done a lot of work in pioneering velocity-based training as we know it. Meaning that velocity-based training has been around for a very long time, back in the late 50s, early 60s. But the system of doing velocity-based training the way we know it, so the loading, certain vertical bar velocity that we're looking at, the entire system is based on Bosko's work. And all this work that we just mentioned, like from vibration to biochemistry, from biochemistry to velocity-based training, is all in the book we translated. Wow. The original book was 500 and almost 50 pages.
Wow.
So really more than a couple of hundred graphs.
Wow. So it's starting from the biochemistry of what's going on in the body all the way into the protocols into, oh, wow. Okay.
From muscle fiber type and muscle mechanics and muscle biology to there's, I think, more than 2 chapters entirely dedicated to testosterone and how to monitor testosterone levels, to measure. We were talking about that, to look for autoregulation, so to speak. So how to fine tune training for your athletes so that you give them just enough to improve them, but never too much to bring them on the verge of overtraining. So I think what's fascinating about that book, which led me like extremely, well, first of all, in love with the book itself, but like fascinated by Carmelo Bosko as a man, as a person, because I've read that book when I was in undergrad. I just didn't have the breadth of knowledge needed to understand how much he has actually done in his career. Like you go from one chapter and you're learning from a physiologist. You switch to the next chapter and you're learning from a biomechanicist. You switch to the next chapter and he's a full-on strength and conditioning coach, coaching athlete, talking to athletes. Like that man was like so experienced and versatile in everything he did that like it's just impressive because he never did only research. He was doing research as a way to support his coaching work. So all the studies that you have in this book are not studies on recreational lifters in a weight room. They're studies on like the Italian basketball national team, the Finnish national volleyball team, like all elite level athletes studied for years and years of length. So a level of understanding of elite level athletes that is difficult to find in any other paper, book, or article that you can find nowadays.
Wow. It is so interesting that there are people like that can go into so many different modalities. And it's so impressive when you say that's like you direct a movie and then also produce it and then act in the star of it and then create the music for it all at the same time. And you do them all beautifully. Like any one of those of research or being a strength coach or any of them, you can take an entire lifetime to get to a master level. So to be able to switch gears and to like speak all different languages all within one text on that's really fascinating.
I mean, you go from a chapter and the guy is talking about the minute details on how to execute, analyze, and read blood work. So like how you collect the samples, how frequently you collect the samples, how you save them, how you store them, how you pull out testosterone levels or whatever the case may be. And then the next chapter is giving you a super detailed breakdown on the difference between depth jump and drop jump, going into moment arm, force vectors, all the like biomechanical type of like nuances about jumping. And then you go into our next chapter and it's all about programming. And you have like training for hypertrophy, you have the DeLore method, you have velocity-based training. It's just insane. It's just every chapter is the best of that topic. And that topic alone can be a PhD like on and off itself, you know? It's so dense.
Oh, wow. Oh, it must have been a blast just translating this and just you're going into it again, just where you're at with the knowledge base.
Absolutely. Like I think I read that book once in undergrad, like little pieces here and there. It was one of my textbooks in school. And then I might have read it maybe like once more later on. But then, like you go on and you just, you explore other things and you learn, and like you keep that in the back of your head. You know that you read it, you remembered it, but coming back to it almost 15 years later, like, man, it was like, I had like a gold mine sitting on my bookshelf, and I didn't even go back to it until now. And now you can see all these crazy details, and like realizing that, like, now that I am doing some of the research too, it's like we're talking the same language, and I didn't even know it wasn't that book because I didn't remember.
Oh, wow.
It was just an amazing, like, I feel blessed just for the experience of translating it.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. I want to dive into it a little bit more on a couple threads there, because the term that you mentioned was velocity-based training. This is personally a term that I didn't really know before until a few weeks back, I talked with John Brookfield, the creator of the power rope system. And he talked about the importance of velocity system. And he explained it in a way, but it still was kind of like going over my head on it. Can you dive into that a little bit more of really what velocity-based training is, and what are we looking for? Why it's such an essential thing to do for athletes and just individuals that are looking to gain strength and health?
Sure. So let me start by saying that Dr. Bryan Mann is the leading expert on velocity-based training. And I would be lucky enough to teach a course with him in June here at the University of Southern California, assisting him. And he's the goat. Like, everything that involves velocity-based training, he's the guy to look at. So I'll do my best to share with you what I've learned from him.
Sure.
And what I've learned from Bosco book, and why not. So the way I usually explain it to my students as well is, think about, first and foremost, the way we normally go about strength training in general, whether you're doing that in athletics or just strength training in general. We do what is known as prescription-based training or prescriptive-based training, meaning that if you want to target strength, or if you want to target power, or if you want to target hypertrophy, we define the quality of the training load by using a percentage of 1 rep max.
Right.
So you want to do strength, you need to move heavy weights. You're going to do 80% or above of your 1 rep max.
Yep.
You want to do hypertrophy, 70%. You want to do power, depends on the movement, but we go by percentage. And that's what a lot of people forget. We go by percentage, but then we also attach to it a certain number of repetitions,
right,
that are most likely to work with that load.
Right, like hypertrophy 8 to 12 reps, and so on and so. Right, okay.
And we do that. Like, there are different ways of going about that. We can just pick up, like, pull out the chart and look at like load a number of repetitions.
Right.
Or we can, for instance, like StrongFirst does, you can apply the concept of repetition in reserve or buffer. We take a percentage of your rep max and you only prescribe that number of repetitions.
Right.
But whatever case you go about, like, you have a load, you have a certain number of reps, you execute, and you're guessing that if your load is correct and your number of repetition is enough to train the athlete, but not too much to get him tired or her tired, you probably develop for that load the highest amount of power possible, but you don't know that for a fact.
Great.
You're hoping, you're not measuring.
Right. Yeah. It's like an educated guess.
Yeah. And that comes from knowing that, see, that's something that people tend to confuse. You don't always have to train at peak power output, which means that, like, every time you're in the weight room, you don't always have to generate the greatest amount of power you're capable of generating.
Right.
However, there's evidence to show that if at whatever load you train, let's leave hypertrophy on the side for now. Let's look at like neuromuscular, so strength or power. At whatever load you train, if you can train at generating the greatest amount of power that load allows you to generate, your adaptation will be better, will be greater.
Gotcha.
And that has been proved with compensatory acceleration training, with velocity-based training. So it's kind of like a common understanding of the way our body adapts to load and loading in general. Now, with prescription-based training, you're doing an educated guess.
Right.
Velocity-based training flips the script. So your training intervention would be the same. You're either training for strength, maybe hypertrophy or power, but mostly strength and power.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
You're no longer looking at the load. You are setting a certain velocity that you want to hit. And that velocity is usually average vertical bar velocity. So the average velocity at which the bar moves during the concentric portion of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that whatever load you need to hit that velocity is going to give you the best adaptation for either strength or power. So load becomes secondary. It's no longer your main focus. You prescribe velocity and you're going to use the heaviest load possible to get to that velocity.
Gotcha. Okay.
So prescription-based training, for instance, is, let's say you want to do strength training. Mm-hmm. You're going to do 3 sets of 4 reps at 80% of 1 rep max. When you do velocity-based training, you're still going to do 3 sets of 4 reps, but instead of prescribing 80% of 1 rep max, you're going to prescribe whatever load you can handle to move the bar at 0.6 meter per second.
Right. Okay.
And what comes with it is that if you then go and you take it a next step forward and you also look at what is known as velocity loss, so how much velocity you're losing from rep to rep and from set to set, you know that if you want to maximize your training efficiency, you want that velocity loss to be somewhere between 10 and 20%.
Okay.
So once you set the correct load and you set the correct speed, if you see that that speed is dropping, you're going to stop the set right there and then.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that becomes a form of auto-regulation as well.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's not as much about the weight. It's about, we're looking at how fast that we're lifting it. So when that power production starts to drop down, that's when we know that's our cutoff.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So on paper, you might have coming in the gym 3 sets of 4, but then for that athlete in that particular moment, after 3 reps, you may see that the speed starts to drop. Then you call it a day. It's 3 reps instead of 4. So instead of doing 3 sets of 4, you do 3 sets of 3. But you know that every single one of the repetitions, those repetitions and every single set will give you the greatest room for adaptation possible.
Gotcha. So, and the goal of this is, it's not as much trying to build strength, but it's about building as much power development quickly as possible. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would take it a step forward and say, like, velocity-based training is literally the glue between strength and power.
Okay.
So it allows you to develop, ultimately, like, you're right, you're developing power, some form of power, with more emphasis on strength or more emphasis on speed, whatever end of the spectrum you decide to work. However, whether you're training for strength or you're training for power, using velocity-based training, the entire force velocity profile will improve as one. Whereas if you do heavy lifting, you might get stronger with heavier load, but not faster with lighter loads, and vice versa. Like if you do a lot of plyometrics, you can be faster with lighter loads, but not necessarily stronger.
Gotcha.
If you do velocity-based training, the entire curve shifts upward. So you're getting stronger, more powerful, and more explosive.
Gotcha. So in kind of layman's terms, it's really, we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone as much as possible in velocity. Yes. That makes a lot of sense, because when I did a lot of studying with strong endurance, one of Pavel's programs for conditioning, one of the main things that we're focusing on is when power production starts to drop down in certain lifts. And it's like, I understood it on a biochemistry side and like a power production side, but also it seems like the awareness of it as the athlete, like you start understanding your RPE a lot more from there. And it makes it actually a more enjoyable way to train, because you're really focused in as well. Cause like in strength work, like you're doing 80, 90%, effort. That 3rd or 4th rep, that bar is going to be slowing down, quite a bit, and you grind it out. It seems like this is almost even a more enjoyable way and an easier way to recover from training rather than just traditional strength training.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we talked about that in the past. Like, we are all like strength training enthusiasts or addict, or we just love training. So I'm assuming that when we step in a weight room, we're going in flat out, like we're going to get everything out of our workout because we're very motivated. So we push every rep, we push every set, we push our boundaries constantly. But when you work with athletes and you work with maybe several athletes at the same time in a weight room, it's very difficult to know how much effort they're putting in every single rep, in every single set. But when you start putting an accelerometer on the bar and you see that velocity dropping, or you see that they're not pushing what they're capable, you can keep them honest. You can call them out. You can adjust the workout if needed. So it becomes a way of, the way I look at it, looking at the bigger picture, velocity-based training at its finest is a way to do less, but do it better.
Okay.
And if you do less, like you said, you can recover more, you can enjoy more, you can leave more time to do other stuff like technique work, rehab work, or pre-injury type of work. So it's a great tool. I think whether or not we decide to use it as practitioners, it's a tool that everyone should be familiar with. And nowadays that accelerometers are so affordable and everyone can buy one for a couple of $100. I think it's something that everyone should be comfortable using for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, even getting started too, like just seeing like that rate of exertion, you can see the big changes. And it's interesting you said that too, because a lot of times with strength training, we think like the percentages of 1 rep max, but a lot of times we don't really know that 1 rep max. Like a lot of like it's kind of a challenging thing to really understand a true 1 rep max, you know, for people. So you are kind of taking that educated guess where velocity-based training allows you a little bit more of that wiggle room. So it's not as much about the load. It's more about really the force production and the velocity production. So it's almost, it seems like an easier way to program too with athletes or people that you're working with. And
it becomes even easier if you're doing remote coaching, because once you have a force velocity profile, so to speak, every set, every rep, every load, you can collect that from your athletes if you're training them remotely, and you know exactly how that workout went without even needing to like look at videos or asking for feedback. Like velocity tells you the story of the workout. Like, you know exactly what happened. You know exactly where fatigue started to cripple up. Like, you know everything you need to know to control that workout.
Yeah. In the book, is there any work on the biochemistry side of seeing how velocity training still impacts the numbers of, you know, testosterone production and like the, you know, the mitochondria type work that you normally see from strength training? Are they seeing the same benefits of doing velocity-based training?
It's all based on biochemistry. The study that Dr. Bosco published in that book looks at velocity-based training, and he compares it between male and female sprinters, weightlifters, and recreational bodybuilders. And he measures that across different training intensity, velocity loss, which Bosco measures in terms of power loss, more than velocity loss. And he looks at testosterone, because ultimately, that's funny. Like I've always had a deep appreciation for endocrinology and like the study of like hormones and whatnot. But for many, many years, I got trapped into more of the molecular type of biology, like mitochondria, muscle fiber types. But the more I read and the more I go into some of the older studies, but still very good and very current, and I'm referring to Bosco, but also like Viru, which is one of the major sports biologists ever. Like Pavel mentions him pretty much in every course he does. When we look at strength and we look at neuromuscular training in general, so strength, power, it really all comes down to testosterone. How much testosterone you can generate, how much testosterone can you preserve, how often can you spike testosterone concentration in a week? Like all the variables that we're so fascinated about, like training frequency, training load, how long a session should be, how much volume, it all comes down to the impact that that sessions or those sessions have on testosterone.
Right.
And velocity-based training is a great way of controlling for that in a indirect manner. So you're not taking blood samples on the spot, but just by looking at the physiological response to your training load, you can kind of like figure it out what type of response you're most likely to get.
Right.
At your hormonal level.
Yeah. And it seems like it's a good way to recognize overtraining really quickly too. I mean, there's the dynamometers where you can see grip strength, which I think is always a great test for it. But with power training too, like if that velocity, it starts to decrease really quickly on that, okay, now this is an indicator of, we're off balance. We need to take some time off or so. And so it seems like it's a good indicator of that in a really safe way for athletes as well.
You mentioned something extremely interesting, because I literally just finished a presentation for the NSCA on athlete readiness. Mm-hmm. So how you assess athlete readiness. And you mentioned the dynamometer. Mm-hmm. That's a great way of measuring athlete readiness, and it's still extremely valid. But there are recent studies that have been published that show that more static forms of strength, meaning like isometric, mm-hmm. or even like a very heavy 1 rep max, yep. are not as sensitive to fatigue as more dynamic type of training is. Meaning, yes, if you take, there's a study, it's a beautiful study. I don't remember the exact list of authors, but the study was very simple. They took like a bunch of subjects and they had them test their baseline in a squat, a 1 rep max squat, and a counter movement jump. So one was more of a static grind looking right. mm-hmm. rep. So close to an isometric. Okay. Quasi-isometric, you would call it. And the other one was much more of a dynamic type of like strength movement. So a counter movement jump. They test their baseline and then they send them out and they send them to run 21 kilometers. So a full on like exhaustive bout of endurance training. Mm-hmm. So they came back as presumably tired because they ran so much. And immediately after they came back, they retested them in the squat and in the counter movement jump. Wow. Okay. To see which one was more sensitive to fatigue. And as a matter of fact, their squat didn't change, almost didn't change, but their counter movement jump dropped by a lot. Wow. So okay. When you assess readiness, if you can, I don't want to say measure, but at least control for velocity, you have a much more accurate reading on the actual level of readiness of that athlete. So velocity-based training, by combining load and velocity, gives you a great reading on your athlete readiness on a daily basis. Because let's say that on a Monday, my day one of my new program, I have 3 sets of 3 at 0.5 meter per second. Mm-hmm. And I decide to use 80% of my load because that's what I need to get to 0.5. If I come back a week later and I have 3 sets of 3, I keep the load the same, but I can't even get to 0.4 meter per second. Mm-hmm. That tells me right there and then that my level of readiness for that workout is not where it's supposed to be. Yep. And it's very accurate because it takes in consideration the loading component of it, but also the velocity component of it. So it's a much more accurate way of reading readiness compared to like a dynamometer or something like that. That's really interesting. I think that's fascinating with readiness, because we used to do that all the time when we were in the studio. Me and Chris, we would crack up, like you would grab a bell and just kind of feel the grip and start saying, "Oh, where's my strength for the day?" And sometimes after doing that for a while, you can feel the difference in strength. So it might be a good measurement of where your strength is at. But if you're going into athletics and you need to have that power in there, it doesn't seem like that's the best understanding of whether you're ready or not. The velocity-based training and a measurement like that seems like it's a much better course of action. Yeah, and if you have velocity-based training, I mean, go for it. Mm-hmm. But if not, down in SoCal with lifting, we're actually experimenting now with different tests for athlete readiness based on protocols that have been done by professional sports. Some of them are commonly used in the NBA or whatnot. Something as simple as a counter movement jump can be a great baseline level for readiness. Mm-hmm. Like there's no need for velocity-based training if you don't have it available. If you do, go for it. Right. But if you want to test readiness, and I say that over and over and over again, like when we create programs, strength training programs, we are in a good way, we're playing God. Like we're putting an intervention together and we almost expect some results to come out of it. Right, yeah. But that's far from being certain and it's far from being guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Like we can hope the best for our program. Right. but we don't know, we can only control the external load. We can't control the internal load an athlete perceives session after session. So if you can find a way to test their readiness on a daily basis, you're keeping your finger on the pulse on a daily basis, and you know whether or not your athletes are recovering or not, if they're improving or not. So I encourage everyone to develop a system, whatever the system might be, to check readiness as often as possible. And that can be done, like literally all you need is, if you don't have anything available, you need a wall, some chalk, and you just jump and mark your counter movement jump.
Right.
But just by doing that consistently, developing a benchmark of what your normal level looks like, and then look at variations, you can see, you can literally look at adaptation as adaptation happens in front of your own very eyes. So it's great.
That's such an interesting concept and such a great idea, because, you know, as coaches, we're always putting out programs, and really what we're doing is we're hoping for the best, you know, and clients, the same type of thing. They're like, oh, okay, cool, this is the program. But I've said to many clients before, it's like neither me nor any other coach can know exactly how you're going to respond to this program. There might be a million different, you know, thoughts and ideas. Maybe a bunch of people did very well with it, but we still don't know how it's going to work for you. So the readiness technique and just having some sort of system, like you said, it could be whatever works best for you. You know, like you said with the chalk, I think that's a beautiful thing, especially for young athletes. Like, here, just, you know, do this and just check it. Anybody can do that. Like, it doesn't need a lot of skill in order to know where it's at or not. But that's like the biggest thing as strength coaches, is not about how much different programs we do, but how ready are your athletes that you're working with.
Let me give you an example. And I preface, it's just an example. I'm not saying that's what happens. It's just to give you an idea. But Bondarchuk, in some of his books, reports the results of some unpublished study. I think he actually published them. He just published them in Russian, and they were never translated in English. But he said that on average, when you're working with elite level athletes, your level of readiness can vary between 2 and 18% on a day-to-day basis. So you have day one, and you have your day two in training. You can be fully recovered, or you can be somewhere between 2 and 18% below your normal level. Now, let's translate that into numbers just to keep it simple, okay? Very simple. Let's say, that's not what happens, but it's just to give you an idea. Let's say that you go into the weight room on day one, and you as a coach programmed 3 sets of 3 barbell back squats at 80% of warrior max, common work. On day one, you're fresh, your readiness is 100%, you're good to go. And you can easily do 3 sets of 3 at 80% and finish your work. But let's say that you were half asleep when you were programming, and you put again those 3 sets of 3 reps at 80% less than 48 hours later. So you're not fully recovered. Your athlete goes in the weight room. Let's assume that the very first session that you did was very taxing, and your athlete is very fatigued. And now the level of readiness dropped 18% below your normal. That means that 80% that you have on the bar will feel like 98% on the bar. Can you do 3 sets of 3? No, you can't. So you can't expect from your athletes to be able to do that. So they go in and it's a flop. They couldn't even perform their workout. They maybe tried. Chances are they got hurt, or they have more chances of getting injured. And the whole training process starts to fall apart. Whereas if you control for that readiness, you will control that coming into the gym. You will see that your athlete is not recovered, and you will not do 3 sets of 3 at 80% because you know your athlete is not recovered yet.
Right. And and like in the client and athlete's mind too, they're thinking that they're regressing at that time because, oh, I did this the other day and it felt great. And now what's going on? I can't do this. And it's the mental side of it at the same time. So it's so important to get this on both sides, the physical, but also make sure that the mentality of who you're working with is on the same front.
Because I mean, none of us, not even the best coaches can exactly expect what's coming after a workout. Every session is a game on its own. Like you do that training session, you produce the intensity you can. God knows what's going to happen in 24, 48 hours, 72 hours or whatever. You have no way of measuring. Your athletes might be recovering 24 hours. He or she might be recovering 72 hours. You don't have a way to know that unless you find a system to keep track of that change. And measuring for athlete readiness, whether you do that with velocity-based training or you do that with a counter movement jump, right, or the way I do that is with a drop jump, whatever system you use, you have a way of measuring the change in readiness over time. Mm-hmm. So you always prescribe load when load is appropriate.
Right. And it's so vital, and I love it. And like you said, no matter what system that you put in or whatever, just keep it the same, with it. Because also as a coach, you can understand it, but as the athlete too, they're going to understand it as well at the same time. So it's gonna be okay. Like, I understand. I need to drop it back a little bit, from there. That's fascinating. This work is so great that you're doing with this, Antonio, and I'm excited to see this book. I know you're doing another study as well, which is on the kettlebell front that you're working with StrongFirst. I know it's kind of just getting into the beginning stages of it, but would you mind kind of explaining exactly what you're doing? Kind of what's the goal of the system? So
we actually have the first participant coming in 45 minutes. So starting today. Today will be the first data collection. Well, first of all, it's something that I don't personally take any credit for. Like, we developed that with Brad Jones, Fabio Zanin, Annalisa Naldi helped a lot. Many people in StrongFirst were involved in this project, and I was just lucky to be able to participate. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, this morning I got an email back from Italy through one of our connections with Fabio Zanin, and University of Padova, where I'm from, is going to join the project. So it's going to become like an international type of collaboration.
Awesome.
To increase the number of subjects and participants. And it's going to be a series of studies. It's not just one. Our goal, our vision is to provide StrongFirst and all practitioners with, so the way StrongFirst does training is already top notch. Like, everything is like evidence-based. Everything has a solid foundation of science behind every single decision, from exercise selection to loads, reps. Everything is very well coded and very well put in place. Mm-hmm. We just want to provide newer, more updated evidence to support best practice in strength training using StrongFirst principles. So it's more of a refresh, upgrade of everything we already know, just looking through the lens of more in-depth research with biomechanics and other technologies. So for instance, the first study that we're doing now, which is starting today, we are looking at something very simple, which is just a kettlebell swing done with the technique of the art style kettlebell.
Yep.
And we're going to be doing a number of swings on force plates with a bell of progressively heavier weight. And we're just going to be measuring power output at different loading conditions. But then we're going to also compare that power output at each load. We're going to be normalizing that by the weight of the kettlebell as a percentage of the athlete's body weight. So how heavy that kettlebell is in relationship to your body weight.
Okay.
But we're also going to normalize that by strength level, testing peak isometric force in an isometric mid-thigh pull. So we'll be looking at not just what's the ideal way to generate greater power output or the greatest power output in a swing. We're also going to normalize that by body weight and by strength, so that we can create guidelines for every athlete from beginner to advanced of any body weight, male and females alike, so that whenever you're prescribing a swing, if your goal is to train for power, you know exactly what load to use based on strength level and body weight.
Wow. Okay. Oh, that's beautiful there. So I like it because it's percentage of body weight that's so vital, from there. So seeing how much force is produced from each bell that you're working with.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So starting with the swing, I'm sure you're going to probably go into some different modalities as well, to work with as well, but that's the foundation right off the bat.
Our goal is to eventually be able to not just looking at kettlebells, but also start to create a correlation, so to speak, between kettlebells and barbell lifts, so that you can start let me give you an example. Probably I can explain that better with an example. Like,
sure.
If you look at weightlifters, competitive weightlifters, they have their percentages for the snatch and clean and jerk.
Yep.
But usually when they go about like traditional barbell lifts, like a front squat, a back squat, an overhead press, they don't really care about their true 1 rep max in that lift. They prescribe that as a percentage of their competition lifts.
Okay.
Like a front squat might be based on their clean 1 rep max.
Gotcha. Okay.
That type of situation. We want to create something similar with kettlebells too, where like you have metrics to tell you like, okay, if you want to double swing a certain amount of weight, your back squat should be such and such, or your front squat should be such and such.
Gotcha.
We can create more of a connection between barbell lifts and kettlebell lifts that can ultimately help you program, but also test your athletes in a more efficient manner.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. That's a beautiful thing because so many, especially in weight rooms, like the barbell has been so sufficient for so long and we understand those, but how that correlates with what you should be utilizing for a swing or for a 1-arm swing or double, swing. There's not a lot out there. Usually it's just an estimated guess of whatever the coach thinks of going on, but that's really interesting.
It's going to be hopefully, well, again, this is a big teamwork and we're all doing it together. We're also going to take probably soon a field trip to go see Annalisa up north and test some of the instructors up there too. It's a team effort, teamwork, and it's something that is going to grow over time. So we are growing with it as the project develops. And we're going to be looking into many, many things, and it's probably going to be some years worth of research. So I'm extremely excited to do that.
I'm sure it's got to be, as a researcher, it's like you kind of have to shut your brain off for what you think is going to happen and almost just look at it so objectively. But I'm thinking like that must be so challenging because I know there was old stories, I forget who it was, but like being able to produce so much force with like a 24 kilogram bell versus like a 48 kilogram bell, like double the weight, but being able to do it. I wonder what it's going to look like with somebody who's proficient in kettlebells, if they're able to project more force with a lighter bell versus somebody who's not as, technically sound with it.
Sounds like you're reading my mind. So the idea we're doing now, we're looking at what we normally refer to as confounding variables. So background noise, so to speak. We want to eliminate any bias due to skill or technique. So now we're strictly testing SFG1 or above.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that the level of technique is sounded, and when they come in, their swing might not be identical, but they have a level of proficiency that the swing is put on. In the future, probably our very next step will be to compare beginner and advanced. To do that, we might have to include some motion capture type of analysis, which is a bit more sophisticated, but nevertheless still very doable. We're building knowledge as we go. So we're starting from what is somewhat easier, and then transitioning something that is somewhat more difficult because, when I'm obsessed with F1 cars, but if you have a very cool technological device that you want to test for a car, and if you put it on an F1 car, it's going to give you immediate feedback whether it works or not, because that car is going to be pushed to the limit. If you try it on my Toyota Corolla going 40 miles an hour on the street, it's not going to tell you much.
Right.
So same thing with kettlebells. We're testing our ideas and our methodology on our F1 people, so SFG1 type of instructors or above. So we can have a good reading of what our intervention should look like. And then we can scale it down to people that have less experience and still get valuable information out of it.
That's so interesting because this is so anecdotal, but like I've swung almost every different type of bell over years and years. And like I've used 56 kilogram bells for 2-hand swing work. And then even just last week, just kind of going into a little bit of a swing push-up work, I used a 40K bell, which for a 2-hand swing is relatively medium to light, but my force production felt so much different on it. So it's like a lot of times, especially, as athletes and, as coaches, we think, oh, you're going to have a heavier bell, so you're going to be able to produce more force. when in reality, it might actually be that Goldilocks bell that you're going to find of something that's not necessarily so heavy as a load, but able to produce the most force with the best technique.
So yeah, force is probably likely to go up with the weight of the bell, but it's the power that is going to change a lot. So like you can, let's say that you can easily swing a 48 with 2 ends.
Yep.
You can do that. No question asked. You can do your set of like 5, 10 reps, whatever. It might look good. You're handling with good technique, but that doesn't guarantee that you're expressing very high level of powers. You're just doing it.
Right. Okay.
You're strong enough to do it, but the power might not be at your peak.
Right.
Maybe dropping it down to a 32, it might feel easier because your technique is on spot and your level of strength is on spot. But then if you go and look at individual reps, you're probably generating more power with the 32 than the 48. Or you're most likely to be generating more power with an intermediate weight kettlebell more than a very heavy one or a very light one.
Gotcha. So to find that kind of perfect bell for the athlete is where you're producing that great force on the force plate, but also producing the most power at the same time.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Peak power happens when either force or velocity is at its peak. It's always going to be a compromise between the two. So if you go too light, you're not going to get peak power output.
Right.
If you go too heavy, you're not going to get peak power output. It's going to be somewhere in that ballpark in between. But that in between depends on your level of strength and depends on your body mass, depends on many confounding variables. And that's exactly what we're looking for with this study.
You know, it's funny because I talked the other day with Pavel Macek, who's a master SFG instructor, and we were talking about snatch work. And, you know, Tim Almond from Australia has probably done more work with hardstyle snatching than anybody else on the planet. And a lot of his work that he's done is using sub-maximal loads for snatching, you know, where he could easily snatch a 48 kilogram bell, but he's doing work with a 32 and stuff. So relatively light, but found that actually is getting stronger using the lighter bells because you can get that most power output, you know, from it. So it's like, it's still kind of in a lot of our minds of heavier is better, but it's like, no, it's finding that Goldilocks weight that you can really get that power production. That's where you're going to get the most results from. It seems like this research is going to go right into the stem and really give us some really good information of exactly what weights we should be using on the kettlebell front.
Yeah. And I mean, on a different level, just look at the way where lifters train. Like their goal in competition is to lift the greatest amount of weight possible to win in competition, the snatch and clean and jerk. But in their training, the vast majority of their volume is between 70 and 80, 85% of what I max.
Right.
So they're always in that ballpark to where like they can play around with load and velocity and they can do power, they can do full lifts, whatever the case may be, but they're always maximizing their power output because that's what's going to get them better on the long term.
Right. And I'm sure they're doing a lot of readiness tests too, and they're adjusting on the fly the way that they need to. So it's like, this is all the work that is from the top level now. So everybody can really, you know, see this and we can get, you know, this information to everybody.
But I never stress that enough. Like developing a system to measure athlete readiness is key for anyone in any field that involves athletics. It's not just strength training. Like you can be an amazing coach and have decades of experience coaching and programming, but every person is different. Every athlete is different. And the same athlete will respond in a different way to your program at different times in their life. Like the same athlete responds in a certain way after 1 year of training, it will or she will respond differently after 5 years of training, after 10 years of training, coming back from an injury, after a competition. There's so many variables. You need to have a way to test for athlete readiness. Otherwise, you might be doing a very good job at guessing, but that's about it. You're not fully in control of what's happening in front of you with the training process.
Yeah. It's got so much correlation with some of the stuff I've talked about with, you know, with Brett Jones and his work with iron cardio. You know, he's been doing that for years. He's got his book coming out, and we've talked a lot about the intuitive side of training. And it's kind of combining that super structure and that plan with listening to your body and going to your workout with a question to your body versus just, you know, going in and just, because if a lot of times we're very good at following a plan. It's like, all right, this is what it says today. But if your body's not ready for it and you don't have a system of understanding it, that's when tweaks and injuries occur, and then we blame the squat or we blame the pattern. It's like, no, it's like, no, the exercise was fine. It was doing its exact part. It's like your body just was giving you a different answer and we just didn't listen to it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So as coaches, I mean, that's the main thing, right? It's like all the plans and stuff that we put together, it's all great and it's all important, but this type of work that we're talking about, knowing when they're ready, knowing how they can give their best on a day-by-day basis, that's the stuff that's going to keep athletes on the field, is going to keep people feeling great every workout, not having those tweaks and injuries that puts us away and then we can't train for a while. So this is the vital stuff that we all need to know as coaches and as clients and athletes. This is something, if we can all understand together, then everybody's going to be making progress and being consistent.
Absolutely. Like, again, the weight room should be and is meant to be a very safe place to train. Like lifting bars and swinging kettlebells should not be dangerous. Mm-hmm. It becomes dangerous when you do it in a state of fatigue, where you no longer control your body, your technique starts to fall apart. You start overloading structures that are not meant to be overloaded that way. And that's how you get hurt. But like you said, it's not the movement. It's not the squat that hurts. It's not the swing that hurts you. Mm-hmm. It's you doing that in a less efficient manner because you're not ready for that load. Either you're progressing too fast or you're asking too much out of your body in a moment that your body is under stress and under fatigue. So being able to check or monitor readiness, it's a great way to guarantee progress over time and avoid, at the best of your abilities, avoid injuries.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's great stuff. Antonio, I think we did another awesome one here. So I simultaneously am so energized and need a nap after I talk to you every time, because there's so much information in my head now, because I just love the work that you're doing. It's freaking phenomenal, man. And I'll have to have you back. We'll go into this study a lot more as you're getting more research on it and see what works. But dude, it's so good to see you. I'm so pumped that you're in the kettlebell world now and you're doing that stuff as well. Now it feels so good on my end from here, but I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll do another one very soon. And the book now from Bosco that you translated is available now for
It's available as of last Friday. So it will be on the Ultimate Athlete Concept website. Okay. And it's available. It should ship as soon as next week, I think. So it's on pre-sale.
Oh, awesome. Perfect. All right. Yeah. We'll get that definitely in the comments for everybody to get in. And yeah, we'll see each other again very soon. You're a staple.
It's a thing now. Absolutely. Periodically we catch up.
Oh yeah. We just keep rolling from here. No, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, listeners. Thank you so much for connecting. Follow Antonio, get the book, study, all that good stuff. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.